So my name is Zeljka Himbele. I'm a curator based in New York City, originally from Croatia. I've been living here for more than 15 years and working as a curator primarily with non-for-profits, both in the States and abroad, working on with various institutions on exhibitions of different sizes, different concepts. Currently, I'm a curator at large at Urban Glass in downtown Brooklyn, which is the institution that was founded in the late 1970s and works on promotion of glass as a creative medium.
My name is Karina Aguilera Skvirsky. I work in photography, video, and performance. I'm half Ecuadorian and half American of Eastern European Jewish descent. And my work often has a autobiographical component to it. And I really come to this subject kind of very much from the outside. While I've always had an interest in architecture, it kind of shows up as maybe a secondary subject. And in this particular project, I was in Ecuador working on a video in 2015 when I went to this archaeological site near Cuenca called Ingapirca. And I went as a tourist, but I also realized it was a tourist site, but also an archaeological site. And it's like Ecuador's Machu Picchu, but much smaller. Mm-hmm. And so I was fascinated by the way that it was constructed because it used Inca technology. And since we were just beginning to have it was an election year in the US where there was a lot of discussion about walls being built on borders. I became particularly interested in the Inca technology of building walls, which doesn't use mortar, right? So it's like the volcanic rocks are cut very precisely to fit into kind of like a jigsaw. And also, even though the Incans were not like pacifists by any means, they weren't building walls as borders. They were building them they were interested in the spiritual connection to the astros. So I found that like a very interesting kind of way to think about, one, what can Inca technology teach us today, and how can we shift our thinking about walls not being borders as they've been used like maybe in kind of modern times.
My name is Elisa Pritzker, and I'm an Argentinian born American, and I work in two-dimensional, three-dimensional installations and photography. And it happens that I went on a trip also to Patagonia in Argentina, and I got very touched, and I had certain events that put me in touch with the Selknam people from Patagonia. So since then, I created my own symbology inspired by these people that they were in the territory over 10,000 years. So before they got into, the genocide and all the history about them, but they are still alive, and it's really a pleasure to be inspired by them. So I have my work goes to history and archaeology because I think and I feel strongly that the past can teach us, like you said, a lot of ideas and ways of thinking how to make our world in the present time better. So I go with the past, but I put in a contemporary feeling into my work, creating this new way of expressing like symbols and iconography. But I think that energy from the past can help us to understand who we are in the present. And definitely the work that I have related with this. I remember one of the latest pieces is called Archaeological Fragment from Buenos Aires from this year 2022. And this is a way that I collect things on the street. I feel like an archaeologist, that I collect some kind of piece that I encounter, and I have the feeling that in 200 years will be a piece of Buenos Aires or New York or wherever I am, that could be like a sign of who we were at that moment. So the same that we studied fragments from Egypt, I think that my work could be a sign or something that will reflect who we are now, but in the future. So those fragments that I paint, I hope they will be that kind of symbol for people in 200 or 300 years.
My name is Jamie Martinez. I'm from Tolima, Colombia, which is a city of Ibagué. It's a small town in Colombia, and moved here around 13 years old. We have the Pijao tribe there, which through the DNA test, that's where I am 45%. So I used kind of the spiritual combination used with archaeology, history, research, to kind of create artwork, mostly sculptures now, some paintings that kind of create conversations to comment on the colonial environment we live in. So trying to bring the past also within contemporary conversation. In my new series, I started really with the Egyptians, believe it or not, being Colombian, because my work, in my current series, I'm more interested in how art protects me as I enter the underworld. So I'm using art, creating spells, and using a lot of Mayan spells, research, to ask for permission and to go back to history. And a lot of people back in the day used art to take you into the unknown, which really is death, or to comment on the current living situation in everyday life. So I want to explore more the spiritual part of not only creating an art object, but really researching and trying to transfer that energy into the object. And as my next step happens, I really wanted to take me into the unknown. Nobody knows what's there. Mm-hmm. So it's almost a lot of research and dedication, because this has to work. Not sure if it's even art. It's more like a self-protective mechanism to my next step after I depart this world.
I would like to maybe mention the project that I did actually several years ago with the artist Elisa for the gallery called Curators, which is situated in the Essex Street Market on New York's Lower East Side. And that market was founded in the early 19th century, and at the beginning it really reflected the local population of that time, which was primarily Jewish and Italian immigrants who were also sellers and customers of the market. And gradually the neighborhood is, and Alison was really interested in that. And for the gallery, she built a site-specific installation, which kind of resembled half-finished store. And she utilized all these layers of history of the market. For building the installation, she used different patterns that she found in the architecture and surroundings of the market. She also used installation furniture found in the gallery from the previous installations at the gallery. Also, local vendors started to inquire about the project, and they contributed different sorts of produce. And that's basically how the whole installation ended up to be. It really presented these different layers of history and people that kind of congregate around the market, the news market nowadays.
We cannot section humanity. We are one stream of history, archaeology, anthropology. So sometimes the modern world, because we evolve into technology and a lot of things, a lot of changes, it looks like we are a section, but we are not a section. We are a consequence of the past. And that is something that I think that we are understanding, or at least many artists are, we are opening up to that idea, to that feeling, the concept of certain things like be closer to nature. This is one of the experiences that I had with the Selknam people. They are so close, but close, it means no, look at this, this is a nice tree. They are really one with the tree. So how we can separate ourselves from nature is something that is a contemporary thing. So that is a very important truth, and we can bring that truth to our time. That is, visiting the past is very important to understand where we have to go. That's one of the things that moves me to go.
I was thinking while you were talking that you have archaeology, which is like based in these, objects but it's really about thinking about in this contemporary moment, like who made those objects, and there are descendants who are alive today who can speak to that history. Like it's not a kind of modern perspective of discovering this. It's something that's still present and alive. And I think, for us as artists to kind of engage with that history and engage with the people that whose history that's a part of, and it's even part of us, right? I think is to reconnect that part of us as well, and to recognize that the objects don't exist in kind of a vacuum without the people that created them.
It's a conversation that we're trying to continue, which art is, period. From something that was made 1,000 years ago, there's still a conversation that you can keep moving. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to chew, a lot to mix. Same with just pure art, getting the archaeology part out of it. We're continuing a conversation, even if you absolutely copy and work exactly to the bone. It's still a conversation that needs to go on. So,
well, 1,000 years looks like a long time ago, but in the story of the world that was created billions of years ago, it's just a small portion. So that is also what I learned from archaeology and anthropology, that 1,000 years in the history of humankind is really a short period in the creation of the world. So this is many things that we are reconsidering when we create and when we approach our work. I want to say one more thing, that I was thinking about something that I heard about why humans have two eyes and in the front, and we are looking like that is our perspective. We look that as our perspective. So for me, integrating other sciences, it means that I can have a better perspective, the sum of everything, a better perspective about who we are. And so
we'll be the history one day. One day we'll be the ones there trying to connect with that's been gone a long time ago.
Exactly.
No idea well, there's a lot more, obviously, because of the recording situation of it. But through art, it's just different. It's just a different almost animal, and more of a, hopefully, an honest comment on what's happening than how crazy we have, especially with social media and everything. It's all over the place. But
there are theorists also who are criticizing this obsession almost with material objects that Karina was also mentioning, and really see it in the framework of the whole Western culture, right? And what you guys were saying also brings to my mind the work of another artist, Kristen Neville Taylor, who I recently met, and she has this very interesting series of works, the drawings that are kind of like a diagram where she's trying to visualize how that traditional system focus on object works, and then how to position the other side that I think you were talking about. She calls it the absence, right? The absence of knowledge, and how to approach that.
Well, we have a culture of transmission verbally, but also the objects are what show us what happened like 2,000 years ago. So it's not the object because of the material object in itself. It is really what we can learn, because many things that we discover, they have like a scripture and, you know, a message. So they are objects, but they are more than the object. It's the spirit of that moment.
Yeah.
So
Depending on which side of the object you focus on,
Exactly,
right? And how do you
exactly.
approach research
exactly,
of it?
exactly.
And they're all different too, even within. It's one object is different than the other one, just like an art piece, and has its own energy and its own.
Yeah, that is why I always like this gathering that we have together, this conversation, because we all bring a different point of view, and together we bring like a bigger point of view. Yeah. Like we can approach what art and archaeology or art and humans are. We are, you know.
But I was thinking about that issue, right? Like, I think I'm not an outsider artist, so I was, you know, trained in the academy. So I fall into the same kind of trap of like, I was fascinated by the artifact, by the site itself, but when I start to dig around, like my experience at Ingapirka, then I realized, oh, but the very first connection I made was with a guide who was from the area, who talked about it. So it was contextualized by a person who was from there, who could trace his family back. And so then it's like, it's that, you know, I can't deny how I was trained and how I am, like how I think about it, but I can complicate it, right? By not staying with just that mode, which I think is like, in a way, a superficial mode, right? To just look at the object. And maybe that's what we as artists can bring to archaeology, that we don't have to follow that rigid system.
Right. Right. And I would maybe connect to that, you know, traditionally, those objects that are getting the most focus are used to be, in fact, you know, objects of the wealthy, like temples, wealthy burial sites, or palaces, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, nowadays also archaeology is trying to research the stories of the others, of normal people.
The real world.
The real world, yeah. Exactly.
Well, but I think that the objects for me, in a way, they are portals to something else. Yes. It's like a portal, the beginning of something else. You just enter through the matter, but you go to a different realm. Yeah. I mean, it's just a portal, and I think that what you said about the intellectual part, I think that the fact that you are recognizing that is a wonderful step to just open up to a different realm too. Yeah. You know, it's just because you have to be conscious first that you're using all the intellect and all that, but if you let it go a little bit and put it aside, you enter in that path of connecting in a different way with the objects and with the message, I think.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
You mentioned one of the works at the beginning of our conversation. Yes. Would you like to talk more about the series?
Yes, I have different series because of timing, and they are evolving. But I remember one of the pieces that you had in your space, that it was a circle of stones. Oh, and what happened with that circle is that I went every day to collect one stone. It was not like, oh, I go and I want to do a circle of stones on the floor. I just want to, I was like a peregrination, exactly, to go and collect one and feel and dig and do like almost a connection with nature. So I painted all the stones. Now I'm collecting fragments, like different fragments that I paint. I put my own mark to the fragments. The whole series is about fragmentation of things that I encounter, and different objects that I have everywhere that I can find, but mostly fragments, because I feel that those are pieces of history. That's really what I'm doing, is collecting, bringing to the studio, I leave it there, and then when I just have a connection with that fragment, I paint my symbols and my iconography. That's really what I'm doing at this moment. I'm using red clay. I think that you're also using red clay.
I use the cheap stuff, the air dry, because I wanted to give it more of a rugged look, not a well-made piece. First of all, second of all, kind of like almost like a ghost made it, you know. So a ghost child too, something really untrained and unable to almost control its force or energy. And then go right into huge research for especially the Mayans. One of the pieces that I showed recently at Spring Break was the two hands called Permission. So it's two of my hands on red clay, made life size, on both hands. Then I do have a meditation to try to get the spell to protect wherever I'm going. Most of the pieces, I don't know where the piece is going. It just kind of tells me what to do. I just kind of learn to listen more than to be an artist. My work is better when I just try to execute something from somewhere else other than trying to come up with something to almost explain something.
Yes, I totally agree.
So these visions come and they're crystal clear. And for instance, one of that spell is asking permission to the Mayan god to use my hands. Because as an artist, that's the only thing I really want to use if I cross over, to have my hands. Obviously, as you cross over, or any kind, even with the Egyptians, you'd want to protect your heart. So also my hands could do that. And interested, you know, as an artist, that's the first thing that I would like, maybe just even a finger to push things around, scare people or something.
Yeah.
And again, this is something knowing not exactly the unknown. There's always the unknown, not sure if any of this matters.
Yes.
But I believe in the visions again, that yeah, there's definitely a continuation to this energy. Not after anything. Right. There's just a continuation of energy. Yeah. And using art to take me there's really become something really spiritual for me and really challenging.
We are so in the same path, or similar, let's say, not same, but similar, because when I have an encounter with the Selknam people, I was also doing more conceptual art, thinking this is the message or this or that. And that was a revolution in my own life. Like I start like really creating from the heart. Even when I do dots in a stone, it's like, oh, this is the last dot. I don't know why, but I do the last dot and I'm not thinking. This is the first time in my life after 30 plus years of being an ongoing, all the time an artist. This is the first time that I am listening more my heart than my mind. And it's just, it happens when I have this encounter. It was a magic encounter and it transformed my life and the way that I work. And what is your process? I mean, you also...
I mean, I think it's a little different in the sense that a lot of it comes from like, well, that one, the experience of going to Ingapirtica, but then the kind of research that takes over. And so a lot of my research starts very like visually, like just even looking, at what I can find on the internet, and then actually spending time at the site and photographing. And I work in photography and video. So what happens is the video projects take a lot longer and they're kind of hybrid, like I would say sort of documentary and very performative. So in the end, I think what happens is I had an idea and the piece is called How to Build a Wall and Other Ruins. But then the idea, which really kind of combined like the how-to YouTube structure of like asking people, experts and non-experts, how to build walls or how they thought that the Incans built their walls, then juxtaposed with the actual building of a wall. But in the end, I didn't we actually didn't build walls out of rocks. We built walls out of recycled materials. Mm-hmm. So I had this huge shift in the idea of the project that kind of brought it to the present, and like what would be the materials that would be really super available to us today. Because there is like this mystery around how they carved the rocks, how they put them together, even though there's a ton of research about how they did it. And so, you know, in some ways, like I'm interested in the political landscape of how these things are framed. So in YouTube and in, you know, the Discovery Channel, you've got people saying that Incans didn't even, you know, construct these sites, that it was aliens, right? Yes. So how do you counter that in a post-truth world? So I'm sort of really interested in these other ways that the history, that archaeology, that record gets co-opted for other purposes, like to rationalize colonialization and to continue to recolonize. So while I'm actually in the work, as you know, and I let the work and I kind of am a part of it, like I perform in it, and I don't know where it ends up. I definitely kind of have a certain political ideology that I'm, you know, sort of pursuing through that process that I don't think I let go of, right?
I think the moment you start almost stepping away from being an artist and trying to be an artist, the better you get, the more you let something else. Almost, I think the challenge with artists to get so good at it where you can actually take yourself out of it and just, to me, be almost like a transformer of message or energy. Exactly. And that's the work. Not sure if I even did it, but something that comes from something else, even other than just trying to create something. More into the listening. That's where archaeology comes, because there's a message there. These people were leaving messages. We're here to decipher them and to keep the conversation moving. This is a conversation all artists will continue to have until the end of the world. And that is fine art, not other kind of art.